Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Rants show. This is what you've all been waiting for. If you watched my last episode, which I'm sure none of you did, it's about Disney, like Disneyland. We're going to focus on Disneyland, Disney World. Disney as a whole would be like a 3 hour long episode, and I can't do that. I don't have enough Power Wash Simulator gameplay for a 3 hour episode. But I do have enough gameplay for this episode. And this episode is about Disneyland, Disney World, and what it's become. You know, when I was a kid, for some reason, when I was a kid, I wanted to go to Disneyland, Disneyland, Disney World. I'm just going to use Disneyland interchangeably with the two, but I wanted to go. Don't ask me why. And I think the only reason why was because or I should say most people went. I would hear my friends, and this was when I was really young, obviously as I got older, I stopped giving a fuck, but everyone went. Some people went multiple times a year, and I thought that I was missing out. And that is the theme for today's video, ladies and gentlemen, missing out. Because now Disneyland is a hellscape. Now, I don't have the most up-to-date statistics, but from what I understand, around 60%, more than half of park goers are from households without children. Now, that is Disney's way of softening the blow of, 60% of their customers are adults, not kids. Disneyland is majority for adults. Now, this is a kind of like one of like those tests that they do for like the chimps, and for that they do for like the, for like the mental patients. If 60% of park goers are adults doesn't send a chill down your spine, you need professional help immediately. Adults should have fun. I think we can all agree on that. I'm an adult. Hopefully you're an adult. Hopefully you're not a fucking kid, because I've been trying to avoid my audience being 99% brain rot Roblox shit. But I digress. Adults should have fun. We work hard. We should play hard. But we should not play in the park playground. We should not play in the daycare's sandbox. We should not play at, the fucking Fortnite tournament or whatever, the Roblox tournament. I think that like adults going to Disney is synonymous with adults playing Roblox. And for liability's sake, I will not say it directly, but we all know what happens when adults get on Roblox. We all know what kind of adults get on Roblox. And I'm not necessarily saying the P word, the PDF files. Sorry, YouTube. But I'm saying truly mentally deranged people. And I don't mean this to be like a mean episode, but because, mentally deranged people can be extremely good, nice and extremely fun, but they're still mentally deranged. The same as like all chimps are mentally deranged, because a chimp could be playing and, eating its applesauce, and then it tears your arms off. Okay? Now, I'm not saying Disney adults are going to tear your arms off, but what I am saying is I tend to avoid Disney adults the same way I avoid angry chimps. I try to cut angry chimps out of my life as much as possible, the same way I try to avoid Disney adults as much as possible, because I'm in fear of what they are able to do. The the um the mental fortitude required to go to a Disneyland attraction, to go to Disneyland, Disney World, is immense. But you do it for the kids. You do it for kids. It's hot. Everything's overpriced. It's packed. It's just overcrowded. The rides suck. But you do it for the kids. But if you don't have kids, if you are doing all of that shit for your own enjoyment, that is terrifying. That is terrifying. Once again, I don't want to be that guy, and I don't want to put Disney adults in one group. That is unfair to make stereotypes about Disney adults. But you know how like most serial killers start off killing animals? I feel like Disney adult is like the first step towards, being like a permanent child. And I mentioned earlier about like the theme of this video is missing out. That is the rationale behind these Disney adults. They believe that they, in some way or another, they missed out on their childhood. So now they have to do things that children do, which is horrifying. That is horrifying. It's really weird because I'm gonna dox myself, but I live in America. And, in general, I understand that some people are better off than others, but I'm talking about in the world as a whole, Americans are fucking spoiled. We are. With the exception of Flint, Michigan, if you turn your faucet on, water will come out. When you open up your fridge, most of the time there will be food. Yes, there are some exceptions, some families, but most people have a roof overhead. Most people have a car. Most people, can eat every day. The rest of the world cannot. So my rationale with this whole like fucking hating Disney adults is these children that are growing up in third world countries, when they grow up and they get into a better situation, whether they move out of their country or whether they, are able to support a family, the last thing that they think about is going to Disneyland because they missed out as a kid. America was in the desert for 20 years. I'm sure you know what desert I'm talking about. But those kids that we were fighting, some of them were kids. The last thing that those kids were thinking about as they were gripping their AK-47 is, man, I wish I was at Disney right now. And the only reason that people like that today think that is because Disney has cleverly orchestrated that. Now, if you wouldn't mind, if you are listening, which I'm sure none of you are, please put on your tinfoil hats for a moment. Please put on your tinfoil hats, and I want you to think about this so far. I want you to stew on it, because this is part one of a long series of episodes that I'm going to make. Not in a row, but the next one will be. So put on your tinfoil hat and sleep in it. Sleep in your tinfoil hat tonight and let the thoughts stir in your head. And be ready for tomorrow's episode, because tomorrow's episode will be a continuation of this one, where we will go into the psychology that Disney has been able to puppeteer. Very, very important. Very, 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 very important episode that you don't want to miss. You don't want to miss. So I appreciate you listening to this, and I better see you tomorrow.